The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
It's coming.
All these voices. All these voices. All these things you can't explain. All these painful memories. They keep haunting you. It's haunting me. It's just the ghosts of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the ghosts of you and me. Of you and me. All these whispers.
My name is James Hershey. Right back.
All these shadows in my mind. With my reflection I can't find. It's just the ghosts of you and me. It's just the smoke and gasoline. It's just the
That ought to
ghosts
do
of
it.
you and me. Of you and me. Don't let them take you away. Don't let them bring you down inside. It's just the mirrors in your mind. Don't let them bring you down.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Staring into the Abyss. I am your host, horror author James Hershey Jr., and with me, as always, my co-host, Old Boy James Ash. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing pretty good. How's everybody tonight?
Tonight's episode is going to be a very, very interesting one. For tonight's episode, we are going to travel up into the mountains of the hill country of Tennessee. There's this small town called White Bluff, and in White Bluff, there's a famous holler where the White Screamer is said to live. It's said to be a white, misty form that wails and cries and screams very, very loudly, and it does it so much that it can cause a person to actually go insane. This is how it got its name of the White Screamer, because of the screaming and the white mist. It has also been noted that if a person was to venture to the spot where they saw the White Screamer, that the grass in that area will actually be burned away. The original tale of this, the origin of this legend, lies in this little story right here that I'm about to read to you. It says, allegedly around the 1920s, a young man built his family, which consisted of a wife and 7 children, a home and farm down in the holler. And every single night, they'd wake up to the sound of this awful crying and screaming. So finally, after this young man has had enough, he grabs his shotgun and runs out into the night, off to find whatever beast is making this awful noise. He climbs to the top of one of the surrounding hills to see if he can spot it, and then he hears the sound of screaming. Only it's the voices of his family and his children that he's hearing, not the original screams. By the time he can climb down the hill and get back to his house, he finds that his whole family is dead. Pieces of their body are thrown around all over the ground and all over the floor of the house. And supposedly you can still drive down into the holler and see the foundation of the house and the graves of the people that used to live there. So that is the original story. So from the original myth here, we can learn a couple things about the White Screamer. We can learn that it screams, obviously. We can learn that it has a form of intelligence because it used strategy on this person. It screamed to get him to come up after it, and then when he was away and left his family defenseless, it snuck back around and killed his family. So that takes a level of intelligence and strategic thinking. And we can also learn that supposedly you can still find the remains of the house and the graves of the people that lived there. thus attempting to add credibility to his original tale. Now, there are other stories about the White Screamer that are similar to this. It's the same basic storyline. In some, they talk about it being a white, misty form. That's where you get that part about it being white mist. That's not in this version, but in some of the later versions, that's added in. So now what I want to do is actually go to some statements from people that live in White Bluff about the White Screamer, and I'm gonna tell you who they are and what they said, and we can try to narrow this down a little bit. And this is where it's going to get kind of really interesting, because you will find as we go on that the original tale of the White Screamer that tells what this creature is supposed to be and what the actual residents of White Bluff who have eyewitness accounts of this thing describe it as. And they're not going to match up whatsoever. And that's very, very interesting to me. So the first one is from a guy named Barry Hutchins. And this statement was given on January 28th, 2006. And he is remarking on the story that I just read you. It says, "I don't know who placed this information on the White Screamer, but they are not from the White Bluff area. The White Bluff area screamer is a documented creature. It has never hurt a human. It prefers dogs to eat, and there is one case of it killing a calf. I never heard of it killing a hunting dog in the woods, but it did take a few from yards and dog pens. It stands about 6 feet tall on 4 legs. It is close to an alpaca in size. It has 3 toes on each foot and a long neck about 30 to 36 inches long. It is short-haired and white in color. Its head resembles a camel, but with a short nose. It has a very loud voice similar to a woman screaming. It is very fast, having been timed on a run from hill to hill. It is estimated it can reach speeds of nearly 70 miles per hour. It has great strength in its legs, back, and jaws. I have older family members that have seen this creature. I have interviewed many people that have seen it, and a few that heard it and did not stay around to see what it looked like. I have seen hand-drawn pictures of it. All the pictures look similar. It has been known to come upon people's porches, but it harmed no one. There has not been one in the White Bluff area since the 1950s. It ranged the Trace Creek area north to Leatherwood Creek, east to Harpath River, and into the Turnbull area and the Sulphur Well area. I only know of one man that shot at it, and that was the man that lost the calf. There probably was more than one of them, but I have been unable to find 2 sightings at the same time. At present, there are a group of these creatures documented in a state north of Tennessee. I will not state its name so someone wanting to be seen on the 6 p.m. news will be out hunting them." And that's the end of his statement. Now, as you see here, the description that this guy who has spoken to multiple eyewitnesses gives of this creature is a lot different than on what the legend states the creature is. Because in the legend, the creature is a white misty form. And in his statement, you can tell that it's very much a flesh and blood creature. The next statement is by a woman named Paige Hawks. It was given on October 3rd, 2006. And it says, "What Barry Hutchins said about it is completely the truth. I am a resident of White Bluff and have heard many tales of the White Screamer, and not a single one has to do with it killing a person, although I'm sure it could if it wanted to. I have investigated and talked to many older people of the community who have lived in White Bluff all their lives. They all describe the way it looks in very similar ways. A lot of people are scared of it because of the way it looks. I am included in that category, although I've had the pleasure of never having an encounter with it. And that, I believe, is going to change as time goes on, because I have another statement from her that was given further on in the future. But here we have her agreeing with what Barry Hutchinson said about it from the people that she's talked to. The next statement is by Alex Dampf, and it was given on November 14th, 2006. And Alex says, "I've lived in Dixon County all of my life, and my grandmother has lived here most of her life, and she has told me this story many times. When I was little, I always thought she was trying to scare me, but as I got older, I realized she was truly scared of it. She used to tell me about encounters her father had with it when she was little, and how they would have to put things in front of openings in their house when she was growing up because they didn't have doors. My grandmother is a well-respected woman in the community. So here we have a guy that doesn't actually have a first-hand account of the creature, but he remembers hearing his grandmother talk about it as they were growing up and telling them about encounters that they actually had with this creature. So this is yet another person from the area that is agreeing with the fact that this creature is a real thing and actually exists and not just a legend. The next statement is from a gentleman named Phil on August 23rd of 2007. And he says, "I've lived in White Bluff for 39 years. And in this time, I've seen the screamer 3 times, face to face. And it does not look like a camel. My first encounter was in 1975, when it grabbed my younger brother walking to my cousin's house, which was only a couple of yards down our old dirt road. We were the only houses on this road. He just began the walk when I heard him holler and scream. Me and my friend came running towards him only to see this creature that was a whitish gray, about 6 feet tall, holding my brother on the side of the road. We were scared to death. This thing had reddish pink eyes and a solemn, stern look, with a roundish head and wide shoulders, and standing on 2 legs. We tried to pull my brother from it, and then it started screaming, and let my brother go. While we were running home, it circled us 3 or 4 times, screaming. We made it to our yard where the light from our porch was on. It stopped and ran across to the hog lot. We told our parents, but they didn't believe us, until my uncle called a few minutes later, saying something big ran across his porch. The next morning, we were missing 2 sows. About 7 years later, it came again and killed our dog and tore our screen door off. My dad shot it with a .30-06, but did not hurt it. We tracked blood for half mile, and then it just stopped. The third and last time I saw it was 10 years ago, when me and my brother were working on his chicken house, just about dark, and we heard something coming down the creek. My brother said, "There, it is. It's back." We had electricity out there and flipped the security lights on. This thing ran behind the chicken house screaming. We both had pistols with us, but we knew they were useless. It just started to run back up the creek and was gone. But the next morning, the chicken house door was tore down, and all his chickens were dead. I can't say that it won't hurt people, because it attacked my grandmother while she fed her dogs. She said it didn't hurt her because of her dogs, which attacked it. She had 10 dogs, all big dogs. My brother passed 2 years ago, but he still said he could hear the screamer from time to time. Don't count on it not hurting you. Now, in this witness statement, there's some very interesting things because, first of all, we learned that this creature must have cognitive thinking because it remembered them and came back after them 7 years later. We also learned that the description of it looking like a camel, like the head of a camel, according to this person, was wrong. And this is a person that hadn't just interviewed a bunch of different people. This is somebody that actually did battle with this thing a couple times. So I would imagine he has some close-up first-hand experience with it, and he's saying it doesn't look like a camel's head. We also learned that either the thing does not like light, or that light will actually hurt it, because as soon as they turned the lights on, it took off running and screaming. Now, personally, I don't think that it's the fact that light will hurt it. I think it's more that with the light on, it's vulnerable, because in the darkness, it can move quickly, and it's hard to see something moving quickly in the darkness that well. It's hard to target something in the dark like that, but in the bright light, you can easily draw a bead on it and fire. Because remember, these kids had guns, they had pistols. We also learned that it tried to attack their grandmother while she was feeding her dogs. And the only thing that saved her was the fact that she had 10 dogs, and they were all big dogs, and the dogs attacked the creature when it tried to attack the grandmother and ran it off. Also, we learned that his brother continued hearing the screamer for the rest of his life. So that means the thing kept coming around and either harassing them or was trying to get him again. So this one kind of contradicts the other ones about this thing being a gentle creature, that it would try to hurt you. Now, it could be that the reason the original people said that it was a gentle creature and wouldn't hurt you is because the people that they spoke to, who supposedly saw the thing, did not have a violent encounter with it. You have to realize, when you're talking about a creature that is not known to science, especially something like this, it's very hard to know a whole lot about it. The only information you really have is the first-hand accounts of people that have actually seen it. And that knowledge base is not going to be very large. Their knowledge of the creature is going to be based on the tiny amount of time that they spent with the creature, or the tiny amount of time that they were able to observe its behavior. So you're not going to have a complete understanding of its motivations or its tendencies or habits or anything. So that's understandable that one group says that it won't hurt you, another group says it will. It just depends on what their individual experience was with the creature. But once again, nowhere in this statement was this a white, misty thing. This was a flesh and blood creature once again. The next statement comes from a woman named Jenny, and it was given on October 1st of 2007. And Jenny says, "This story is so true. My dad lives in White Bluff, where we spend our weekends with him. He lives in a narrow valley where a creek runs behind and in front of his house. He had just moved into the house from a house down the street. My sister and I encountered this creature while taking a stroll down the street. It was very tall and stood near 6 foot. It had weird-looking eyes that gazed and stared through you. It was standing on 2 feet, and it was whitish gray. We had been hearing footsteps behind us, but every time we looked back, nothing was there. Then this thing comes running out of the woods toward my sister and I, and we were in shock and couldn't move until my sister yelled, 'Run.' Then we started running as fast as we could. We ran until we got to our house. It had disappeared when we got to the mailbox. About a couple hours later, my sister and I were in our room. She had started to raise the window when the creature started grabbing at her through the open part of the window. She started screaming, and that's when it started screaming, so that I could not hear her. Then I pulled at her and kicked and screamed, until our dad came into the room. Right when he was turning the doorknob, the creature fled. While it was tugging and pulling at her, it felt like he was staring through me, and I knew it wasn't going to be the last time that we would see it. Until this day, we haven't encountered it yet, but we are hesitant to take long walks down the street now." So in this witness report, once again, this creature is attacking a human being. And more than just attacking it, it is actually trying to, I guess the best way to say it would be, kidnap the person or abduct the person. It's trying to take the person with it. Once again, we have the creature standing on 2 feet. It is whitish gray, once again, and it's about 6 foot tall. So a lot of the same details as the other stories. Also in this story, I don't know if you caught this part, but we also see that strategic planning ability again, because they said that they heard the footsteps behind them, and then every time they looked back, there was nothing there. So it was almost like this creature was toying with them, was trying to sneak up on them, but was also very aware that if he was spotted, then the jig was up, so to speak. So he would follow, and then when they would go to look back, he would disappear. So he would hide somehow, get into some bushes or duck back behind a tree so they couldn't see him. So that takes strategic planning once again. The reason I keep bringing up the whole strategic planning thing is because the only thing scarier and more dangerous than one of these real life monsters is a real life monster that is as smart as you are and can plan how to kill you instead of just attack you like an animal. This next report comes from Paige again, the one that we talked about earlier. This report was given 2 years after the initial report that she gave. This one was given on January 29th, 2008. And in this report, Paige says, "I had interviewed many people about their encounters with the White Screamer. I have been waiting for like 4 years to see this creature, and I finally did. And let me tell you, it is more real than I had ever imagined. There are those who are very skeptical, but you should not be at all. I swear that it exists. After seeing it, I personally believe it is a Yeti, in more common terms, a Bigfoot. My boyfriend was bringing me home one night around 9 p.m. Out where I live is backwoods, near Leatherwood and Narrows of the Harpeth. We were coming around a turn after coming off the second bridge when we saw something standing in the clearing in front of the trees, but it was fairly close to the road. At first, I just figured it was a deer or coyote, because it was already too big to be a rabbit or something like that. Then as we got closer, I realized that it was absolutely humongous. I still can't get over the fact of how broad its shoulders were. The first thing that I noticed was that its eyes glowed bright red in the headlights, and the eyes were quite large themselves. Secondly, I noticed that it was white. That's when I started to get scared. We stopped the car, not thinking about this thing that was actually standing in front of us. I yelled at my boyfriend to drive. We started driving again in disbelief, and he asked me if I wanted to go back, and I said no. I was so terrified that I started to tear up. Surprisingly, he did too, even though I had told him of the creature before. He had always just made fun of me. This proved him wrong, and he knew it. We pulled up in my driveway when my little sister came outside to greet us, and I yelled at her, "Get inside now." She heard the fear in my voice, so she did what she was told. After calming down for a few minutes, my boyfriend left. He called me about 5 minutes later, completely freaked out. While he was going back around that turn, he saw it again, but it was right next to the road, and watched him as he passed like it was waiting for him to go by. When most animals would run off or act skittish, but it just stood there, and was covered in white hair, standing on 2 feet, and was huge. It was more real than anything. So here we have a second account by this woman. If you remember from the first account, she had interviewed a lot of people about this creature. She was definitely interested in this creature, but she had never actually seen it herself. The second account comes after she had actually had her own encounter with the white screamer. Once again, the description of it is the same as the others. And once again, we find the strategic planning aspect of him waiting around to see if the car came back by again. 2 questions that we have to answer. 1, does this thing exist? And 2, if it exists, what the hell is it? As far as the first question goes, does this thing exist? Yes, I believe it exists. I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that this thing is real. The reason I believe that is because I have had a personal encounter with what I believe to be this creature, and I'll tell you about that here in a few minutes. Now for the question of what is it? Well, I don't think we're dealing with a single creature here. I think these witness accounts are talking about a creature that most likely is a Bigfoot or a dogman or something along those lines. Now the original tale that talks about it being a white misty form, I don't believe that that's what these people are seeing at all. That's not this same creature. I believe the legend was here. People saw this Bigfoot-like creature and just started calling it the White Screamer after the legend. But I don't think that this creature is what the legend was speaking about at all. Because the creature from the legend, the white misty form creature that screams and all that, that actually sounds like a variation of a tale from Scandinavian lore about a spirit called an Utbird. Now what that is it's the spirit of a child that was exposed to the elements and left to die, which, as I've covered before in other shows, was a common practice in ancient times. The reason they would leave their kids out in the woods or whatever to die is because they didn't have enough money to feed the whole family. You had big families back then. They couldn't produce enough food or buy enough food to feed everyone, so you take a couple of them out in the woods and you leave them to fend for themselves. If they die, they die. Sounds cruel and terrible, but that was actually done quite a bit back in the old days. But anyway, the Oot Bird is a spirit of a child that was left out to the elements in that fashion and left to die. Now, what happens is once the child died, it could form into a vengeful spirit, which would come back and attack the living. Now, these things usually appeared as white smoke, but they could also take on a human form as well. And they always were known by their unearthly screaming, howling, and they could actually make the ground shake as well. So that's what the original story sounds more like, is one of these Oot Birds. Now, all these witness reports that we were getting about the White Screamer, that doesn't sound like that at all. Okay, it's a completely different creature. What I believe these people are seeing is some sort of variation of a Sasquatch or a Dogman or something like that. I believed it to be a werewolf when I saw it. So that fits more in line with either a werewolf or a Dogman than it does a Sasquatch. Now let me tell you that story real quick. I covered it on another show, but I will briefly go over it again in case you hadn't heard that show. It was right after I had graduated from high school. I was playing music for a living. And there was a whole lot of time when you weren't doing much because you only played on Friday and Saturday night. So we would ride around. That's what you did back then. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have Netflix or any, computers, any of that kind of stuff. I mean, you had computers, but you couldn't get online. So what you would do is you would ride around and try to pick up women because that was probably the most fun you could have at that time period. Still pretty fun. Got to be honest with you, even with the internet, riding around picking up women, still very fun. But that's what we were doing. I was a young guy, probably 19, 20-ish, something like that. So we're cruising around at night, and we were going from one town to another town. And we were along a long stretch of road. I live in the mountains of Virginia. So in between the little towns here is a whole bunch of woods, basically. Woods and fields and stuff like that. It's not like in other parts of the country where you have a lot of cities where all along the road are nothing but strip malls until you get to the next big city. It's not like that here. You have a bunch of empty land, a bunch of fields, and a bunch of forest. So we're cruising down the road in between one town and another, and something comes out of the woods to my left. It is much larger than 6 feet. Mine, I would estimate to be around 8 or 9 feet tall. But the creature comes running out of the woods and makes a beeline for my car. Now, when it first comes out of the woods, I wasn't all that worried about it. I saw it, and I thought, what in the ever-loving hell is that? And I was fascinated, and I wanted to see what it was, so I slowed down a little bit. I was moving at the time. I was driving down the road, so I wasn't that concerned because, after all, I'm in a steel car, and I'm driving down the road, right? So I slow down a little bit to watch this thing, see what it is, and it starts running right at the car. After a second or two of amazement at seeing this thing, I realize that it's coming straight for the car. So I hit the gas to go much faster than I was going before when I was watching it. The creature falls in line behind my car, runs up and leaps through the air. It lands on the back trunk of the car, holding on with these gigantic arms and very, very sharp claws hooked into the back window area where the rubberized portion is, where the window connects to the frame. It's holding there on either side. And its body is on the back trunk, and its head is looking in directly through the back window. I look up into my rearview mirror, and I see this thing's face, and I see these very large, very scary-looking, glowing red eyes. My friend who was in the car at the time, the guy who does our theme music, turned around and looked this thing right in the face. And he let out a very high-pitched, girly kind of scream and was very, very scared. I did not panic in that situation. Instead, I was trying to get this thing the hell off the car. So I started kind of swerving back and forth, trying to make it fall off. And at the same time, I had punched the accelerator as fast as it would go, and I was hauling ass and swerving all over the place, trying to knock this thing off the car. This went on for what seemed like forever, but was probably 5 to 10 seconds. Time kind of stretches in those situations when you get kind of amped up. Finally, the thing loses its grip as I'm flailing around with the car trying to, knock it off. So it loses its grip and it slides down the trunk. While it's doing so, it's grabbing on with its claws and trying to hold on, and it scrapes all the way down the trunk. You can hear the scraping sound of metal. And it falls off, and then nothing. I look in the rear view at the road behind me, but I don't see anything yet. I expect to see this creature rolling onto the road, but it's not there. So I'm wondering, where the hell did it go? Did I imagine all this? Did I make it up? Is it real? Or am I just seeing things? I hadn't been drinking because I was driving around, so I didn't understand what had just happened. I kept looking in the rearview mirror in case, I could see it, in case it came back up on the trunk or something, because I thought maybe it was just holding on to the bumper. It hadn't fallen all the way off. So I decided that it would be a good idea to swerve a little bit more just in case it was holding on to the bumper, so that's what I did. Within a few seconds, I saw the thing actually fall off onto the road and roll, and it got back up and ran back off into the woods. I did not stop to examine the car right away because I wanted to put as many miles between us and that thing. I did not stop in the next town either, the one we were originally going to. I kept on driving right past it, and I went to the town past that before I actually stopped the car. Once I got there and pulled in, I examined the car, and I saw that it did have, indeed, scratch marks going down the hood of the back hood of the trunk of the car. I also noticed that the thing had been holding on to my bumper because I found some blood and a patch of fur on the back bumper where it had been holding on. I guess when I swerved that last time, it must have got caught and ripped a little bit of the fur out, maybe cut it a little bit or something on the metal of the bumper. I don't know, but there was a little bit of blood there. I wish that I would have had the foresight that I would have now to actually bag that evidence and keep it so it could be analyzed, but it never even occurred to me at that time to do that. So basically, I just ran the car through a car wash, and the claw mark stayed until the car finally died, and that car was sold for scrap, so I don't even know where it is. It probably has already been crushed into a tiny cube of metal at this point. I don't have any idea. It was sold many, many, many years ago. But that creature, which I believe to be, we called it the jackal here, that creature, which I believed to be a werewolf at the time, very well could have been this white screamer creature, because the physical description matches, except for mine appeared much taller than 6 foot. But I'm 6'5", so 6 foot to me is shorter than me, and this thing looked bigger than me by a couple feet. So that's the only real difference between the description and what I saw. The coloration was the same. The thing that I saw was white. This thing was white. So it kind of fits. Another interesting thing is one of the witness reports that we went over said that this creature has been spotted, groups of these creatures have been spotted in a state north of them. Now they're in White Bluff, Tennessee. So a state north of Tennessee would have to be either Virginia, West Virginia, or Ohio. Those are the states that are directly over. I live right before you get to West Virginia in Virginia. So it's very possible that the white screamer creature that occupied this area for sure back in the 50s, and maybe a remnant of it still does, but it moved north, according to the witness reports, it's very possible that that same kind of creature moved from Tennessee up to Virginia where I live, and that's what I saw that attacked my car. So I think we're dealing with two separate creatures here, and that's my ruling on it. I'm going to throw over to Old Boy now and get his opinion on this creature, if he thinks it's one or two different creatures, and what he thinks it might be.
And good evening, guys, and thank you, James. The white screamer. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this because at first, he was talking like it was a ghost. And at first I was like, this has got to be a ghost or a banshee because he was talking about screaming. But then he was saying it's an actual creature that's over 6 feet tall. It's white and gray, but it screams. So it's like screams. That's something I've heard Sasquatches yell, but not scream and attack people. I've heard that there is Sasquatches in Texas that do this. I think they went crazy, or they think they're mutated or they are inbred there. That's why they're like that. But I've never heard of it in Tennessee or West Virginia or Virginia. And I think this thing is not Sasquatch. And I'm going to tell you what I think, because it said it had red eyes. And that's right there sounds like it's either a werewolf or the Michigan Dogman, what they call the Dogman in Michigan, the Bay Road Beast in Wisconsin. But this might be a Dogman, and it screams. But see, that's one thing I never heard of. It's screaming. I know it howls and growls. That's something I've heard. But it's screaming. That's weird. That sounds like it might be a whole different creature. But James said it chased him. He's told me about the story about that thing jumping on his truck and his friend getting so scared. The thing that's weird about this is it's screaming. Why would it scream? Because I've never heard a werewolf screaming. I know it growls and howls. That's odd. Because everybody's saying it screams and it attacks people. Because even some of the dog man don't attack people. So this has got to be something different because they're usually black, like a dark brownish black or red, and they stand about 7 to 8 feet tall. This is 6 to 7, 6.5 feet tall. And it's different color. And some people are saying it's a Sasquatch, but then it says it had a head of a camel, and some people say it looks like a wolf. So I don't know what this is. I mean, it sounds, and it runs on 2 feet. At first I was like, they said it sounds like an emu, but it's not. It's not an emu. It looks like a werewolf. So here in California, there's a lot of those alpacas, or they're emus out here. They're about 6.5 feet tall. When they grow, their heads reach out to about 6-7 feet. And these people were raising them in the desert, and they got out. So we saw these 3 footprints. So they would lay in the dirt, so it looked like something was laying there. And we actually saw them. So we thought it was some kind of creature. We called it the Kraken, and it really wasn't. It was one of these couple of these emus got out, and they were running around, and people got scared because you're not used to seeing something 6.5 feet running around like a giant bird with 2 feet. And that's why I was like, at first, maybe that's what it was. But then it's not that. It screams, and they don't scream. And it's not a bird. It could be a werewolf, but I've never heard of a werewolf screaming. Some Sasquatches actually do that, but not attacking. So what I'm thinking is this may be a whole creature different altogether. That it may not be a werewolf or a Sasquatch. There's a possibility it could be a werewolf or a dogman. But it also could be something else because it screams. And that really got to me because I've never heard of a dogman screaming or a werewolf. And then there's people who said originally it was a ghost. So I think that's a whole different... Here's what I think on that. I think that's a whole different story. It just got thrown in there because it looks white. Because, the creature looks like white and gray. And that's what I think that's a spirit, or like James was saying earlier, it could be these kids who were, vengeful spirits coming back for revenge. And it could be that. I believe that. When we already solved that pretty much. That's probably what it is, either vengeful spirits or spirits altogether. Or it could be a necromancer having a Wendigo go around. Or it could be a wraith, for all I know. Because it said, but I probably think it's a vengeful spirit. So we'll solve that part. We'll get that part out of it. Because I know people are saying it could be a ghost. Whatever this creature is, it likes to attack people. So what I'm thinking is maybe it is. Maybe it's a werewolf, but maybe it's some different kind of werewolf that we've never seen before. And people are seeing it now. Because it's gray, whitish gray. I've always heard black or dark black or brown, but not white. That's weird. So this might be some different hybrid. But I think it probably is a werewolf. Maybe it just screams at anger. Maybe that's what it does to scare you. Because he said they're calculating things, and it gets a strategy, and it goes after you at certain points. So it went after James. Let's go back. This thing jumped on the car, and he tried to shake it off. And James has a lot of things. I guess West Virginia has a lot of weird stuff because he had that. He's had Bigfoot in his yard. He chased that off. He said he's seen it before. He's had a grizzly chase him down, and he had to roll down the hill to keep from dying. That's another story you guys can tell you one day. He sees a lot of ghosts, and he's dealt with Shadow Man and Hat Man. You know, he's seen a giant fish come out of a sinkhole. He was telling me earlier about when he was fishing a quarry, and he said he had a big 3-foot, 2-foot fish, and big old giant 12-foot catfish was trying to eat it, and he saw never going in there again. And that was funny because he was telling us about that, and I was sitting there laughing about that. I thought that was funny. But getting back to this creature, this thing sounds like whatever it is. There's more than one. They're 6 to 7 feet tall, and they're not scared of anything. And they have red eyes. They have like a silkish white and gray fur coat, and they have claws, and they'll come at you. And they do it in a smart way. They're strategic. I believe it exists. I just don't know what the hell it is. I think it's probably pointing to the werewolf, but it could be a Bigfoot. It could be werewolves. That's what I'm going to go with. I'll give it about 50 to 60% chance on that. It could be a 30% chance of it being a Bigfoot or whatever this is. I don't know what it is. I've never heard this story before. I mean, I've heard of the Dogman and werewolves, but I've never heard of the white screamer. That plus with it screaming, that's weird.
What I saw looked like a werewolf to me. And I'm a guy that's studied this stuff most of my life. I'm a guy that's been out on a lot of different hunts. But you're absolutely right. The screaming part of this legend throws you off completely. Now, I will say in the encounter that I had, there was absolutely no screaming. From the time the creature left the woods, ran over, jumped on the back of my car, everything that happened, it got knocked off, rolled away, ran back into the woods. Not one time did it scream, growl, bark, hiss, anything. It just looked at us. Now, it might have been growling very lowly or something, and I just couldn't hear it because I was inside the car and it was outside the car. There are several different creatures that look like werewolves. You have, obviously, the werewolf. You have the Dogman, which to me looks a hell of a lot like a werewolf. You have that. You have shifters. They can appear to look as a werewolf as well. And you have skinwalkers. Or there are other creatures such as jinns, which can alter reality, so they could appear to be a werewolf if they chose to. And there's other creatures like that as well that can alter reality, all different kinds of fairies and stuff from that realm. There are many different possibilities of what this creature could be. But you got to have something that has the ability to produce that banshee-like scream. You know, that scary, loud scream. A skinwalker is going to be a magician of sorts. He's a shaman that has committed a very, very heinous act to become a skinwalker. That act, in case you're wondering, is to murder a close family member. You get to a certain point, and then you have the ability to progress further and get into this side of it if you choose. Most don't. The overwhelming majority don't. But every once in a while, you have somebody with some darker tendencies that wants to go this way. The way to progress past that point to become an actual skinwalker is you have to murder a close family member and do a ritual. That involves magic. It involves a lot of stuff that I'm not going to talk about on the air because, frankly, I don't want that kind of information out in the world. The people that know that kind of information already, nothing I can do about that, but I don't want to spread that stuff. Once you have done the ritual, once you have committed that murder, then you can become a skinwalker. Now, a skinwalker is not the same as a shapeshifter. A shapeshifter will actually physically change into different things. A skinwalker never actually changes into anything. The skinwalker is still the same person inside the werewolf or the werebear or whatever form it chooses to take. The skinwalker will put on an enchanted skin. So if it wants to be a gigantic werewolf, then it will get a wolf skin and it will do a spell and a ritual over that wolf skin to enchant it. And then when it puts on the wolf skin, it appears to be the gigantic werewolf. Now, it is not actually a gigantic werewolf. It is simply a dude with a wolf skin on top of it. But it's like an illusion, a psychic illusion that you see that's not really there. That's what a skinwalker does. So when you're talking about magic and you're talking about that kind of dark magic, I'm sure that it would be capable of emitting a very loud scream like that. Now, I don't think this is something that naturally the shaman can do, but most likely there's some sort of spell or ritual he can do that will enable him to do that. Because skinwalkers can also communicate telepathically with you and brainwash you in a way into coming out of a house that you're in so that they can get you. You know, if you're locked up inside and it's outside, it can telepathically call you out. And if you are a weak minded or weak willed person, you can be let out of that house and you'll walk right out into its arms. When you're talking something that has that kind of abilities, I'm sure that it can make you hear an ear splitting scream, whether it actually is there or not. So it very well could be just a psychic manipulation to make you believe you are hearing a loud scream like that when in all actuality you aren't. And then obviously there's always the possibility that it doesn't exist. There's always the possibility that what those people are seeing in Tennessee is simply a Sasquatch, because they have Sasquatches there. There have been a lot of Bigfoot sightings all through that area and close by. It's not out of the realm of possibility that these were simply Bigfoot encounters. You know, I'm not saying they're lying, but a Bigfoot encounter can be pretty damn scary. You know, everybody pretends that Bigfoot is this gentle creature that wouldn't hurt a fly. That's not true at all. You know, Bigfoots do things called tree knocks, where they'll take a large stick, like a branch or something, and beat the hell out of a tree to signal to each other and to let you know that they're there to get the hell out of the way. They will throw rocks at you. I've been out in the woods and the swamps before and stuff, and they've actually thrown rocks at my camp. If you're somebody that is not used to that kind of thing, if you're not used to being out there, and if you scare easily, you're going to be pretty freaked out, because they're knocking on trees or throwing rocks at you, and they will stand there and they will just scream bloody murder. This long, loud, very loud, high-pitched shriek. And that kind of made me think of that. When these witnesses are talking about this shriek that it's letting out, this scream, the first thing I thought of was the scream of a Sasquatch, because they absolutely do that. And it is high-pitched and it is loud as hell. That fits. So it's very possible also that what these people are seeing are simply Sasquatches, and they're just misidentifying them. And the encounter that I had was with something completely different. It wasn't the White Screamer at all. It was simply a werewolf, which is what I thought it was in the first place, or some other creature. Up here they call it the jackal, but to me it looked like a werewolf. You know, the original legend most likely is some sort of vengeful ghost. The witness reports of the supposed White Screamer that everybody is seeing, I don't think has anything to actually do with the original legend, other than the fact that that's what they're calling it. I think what those people are seeing most likely is a Sasquatch, but there's also the off chance that you're dealing with a werewolf or a shifter, skinwalker, something like that. But if I had to bet money on it, I would say Sasquatch. But if it wasn't a Sasquatch, I would say probably skinwalker is what I would bet. And then there's always a chance that it's not real at all. I give that very small percentage chance, because I believe that these people are seeing something out there. You don't put this kind of time and this kind of effort into something like this if it doesn't exist. You know, I don't know if any of you have ever actually been on a hunt before, if you've been out in the mountains and the woods actually trying to find one of these creatures. It's not easy. I mean, you're out there, it gets real damn cold at night. It's very, very dark. And if you go by yourself, like I usually do, it gets very, very lonely when you're out there. It's just you. There's no one to help you. You have mosquitoes that eat you alive. You have ants. No matter how well you try to protect the camp, you have ants that get all over you and stuff like that at night and bite you. It's not a pleasant experience being out in the bush for long periods of time. So I can't imagine that these people would go through all this trouble of trying to find this thing and spending the time looking for it that they do if it didn't exist, or if at least they didn't believe that it exists. If these people hadn't seen these things they said they seen, why the hell are they out there getting eaten alive by mosquitoes and risking, getting bit by snakes and mauled by a bear and all that kind of stuff? It doesn't make any sense. And earlier, Old Boy was talking about my encounter with the bear. I'll tell you that some other time. We don't have a whole lot of time left in this show, so one day I'll run down that story. But a little correction, it wasn't a grizzly. It was a brown bear. Because I live here in Virginia. We don't have grizzlies here. But it was a brown bear. It was a big old mama bear. I guess I got enough time to tell it real quick. It's not very long. I went out hunting, and all I had with me was my bow. And I wasn't really planning on doing a whole lot of hunting. I just brought my bow just in case. I saw a really big buck or something. But mainly, I just wanted to get out in the mountain and just walk around a little bit and just enjoy the day. I head up this hill, and I'm going around this corner. There's a big bit of rock. I'm on the mountain, so there's the rock of the mountain is right there, and I'm going around the corner to where I can't see. I get around the corner, and there stands a gigantic mama bear and her 2 cubs. Now, I don't know if you guys know much about bears, but the very worst thing you can walk up on and surprise is a mama bear with her cubs. They're very, very defensive, and they will absolutely rip you to pieces. But that's exactly what I did. I walked right up to him. I was literally a couple feet away from him. She was obviously startled, but that only lasted a second. Me being startled lasted a little bit longer, I'll be honest with you. But she stood up on her hind legs, bared her teeth at me, and let out this howl, this long, vicious-sounding growl, this roaring sound like you would see in the movies. Now, I always thought when they did it in the movies it was nonsense. But I'm going to tell you, I've seen it for myself. It's not nonsense. And it is a frightening thing to see in person. So she lets out this gigantic roar. Now, everything I'd ever been told about bears was if you are in this situation where a bear is about to attack you, what you're supposed to do is lay down and cover your head with your hands. Now, the theory is the bear is going to walk up to you and gnaw on you a little bit and hopefully leave you alone and you live. You just get bit up a little bit. Now, I don't like that plan. I am nothing's chew toy. I do not allow my body to be bit on and chewed on by anything, if I can help it. Now, I also know that I don't want to fight this bear if there's any other choice in the world. I have my Bowie knife on my side, and a Bowie knife is rather large, but a bear has a lot of fat and muscle. So I don't even know if I could get all the way through to puncture a vital organ to kill this thing with my knife. I'm also holding my bow in my hands, which is capable of doing the job if I hit it just right. But unfortunately, I'm about 5 to 10 feet away from this thing, and I don't have but a split second to make a decision. I'm not going to be able to get an arrow out of my quiver, put it in my bow, and fire before this thing is on top of me eating my face. So I do the exact thing you are not supposed to do. I turn around and I haul ass, running. You're not supposed to do that because a bear will chase you. And believe it or not, you may think bears are just fat slobs, but they can run around 35 miles an hour and they can climb up a tree like it's not even there. There's really nowhere to go to get away from these things. But I decide I'm taking my chances. I'm running. So I turn around and I'm just booking down as fast as I can go. I go back around a turn there, and there's some loose stone. It's like not gravel, but it's like flat pieces that have chipped off of the bedrock there. And I hit that loose stone, and my feet completely go out from underneath me. Now, you know how time seems to slow down in certain situations when there's a lot of adrenaline flowing and everything? I guess that's what happened there because I had a lot of time, it seemed in my mind, to think at that moment as my feet went out from underneath me and I realized I was flying through the air. And I don't mean flying like Superman where you're going to get away. I mean I was just head over heels flying through the air. And I thought, I'm really screwed now because I'm going to land, it's going to hurt, and this bear is going to eat my face. But luckily, instead of falling down on the path that I was running on, since I was right at the top of that hill up on the holler, I flew right off the side. Now that might sound bad, because you don't want to fall off a mountain. That's usually not a good idea. But in this case, it was the very best thing that could have happened to me, because I fell off the cliff, and I rolled down that hill. Now, the rolling part was not pleasant. The landing was even less pleasant because I came to a stop in the middle of a giant thorn bush. The bear went maybe 10 foot down the hill before it stopped, and it just waited and watched me. And because I was laying inside of a thorn bush with thorns sticking in every possible, conceivable part of my body, I wasn't moving anywhere anytime soon. So the bear looks down at me. It stands there for a minute, watching. I don't move. It doesn't move. Finally, it gives me one more rah for the road, turns around and goes back to its cubs because it doesn't want to be too far away from its babies for too long. So it goes back to its cubs. I stayed in that thorn bush for a good 5 or 10 minutes, which wasn't easy to do because it hurt like hell. I'll be honest, it hurt bad. And then I very carefully and gingerly pulled myself out of that thorn bush. Now, I took a lot of the thorn bush with me as I went, and I very carefully snuck the hell out of there. Luckily, I had my bow in my hand the majority of the way down, and I didn't really lose it until the very bottom at the bush, so I didn't have to go far to get my bow. And I just snuck away, back up out of the woods to the car, where I had to pull a pair of pliers out and begin pulling thorns out of my skin. And they went pretty deep, and they were everywhere. So I got the thorns that I could, and then I went home. So I survived the encounter with the bear. That's the bear story that old boy was talking about. And with that, we are pretty much out of time, so I'm going to throw back to old boy for the shout-outs.
I want to give a shout out to everybody who listens on Para X Radio. Remember, 9 Pacific time, 12 Eastern, Sunday nights. If you want to watch our old shows, check us out on James Hersey's YouTube page. It'll tell you where to go. Shadow's Pit, we're affiliated with them. We do some ghost investigations, but we're going to start doing our own kind of. So that's going to be looking forward. There's a big plan coming out. So you guys will keep looking forward for that. We're almost at 4,000 subscribers on YouTube. So keep subscribing, guys. We have 35 to 36 countries now we're being listened to. So I want to thank you guys all. And you want merchandise, he'll tell you where to go. I actually have business cards, and I've been passing them out now. And I just want to tell everybody, have a great night. Misfits, Sugar Ladies, Monster Hunters, and Demon Lovers. I love you guys. Blessed be, and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone, for the support. Thank you for all the love. Thank you for listening. And the YouTube channel is youtube.com/James Hershey Jr. Please go there and subscribe. Check out all the replays of the shows, the other videos. The merchandise store is teespring.com/stores/staring into the abyss. TEESPRING.com/stores with an S on the end /staring into the abyss. That's where all the merch is. And just once again, thank you guys. Until we speak to you again, love many, trust few, and do harm to none. God loves you, and so do we. Bye-bye.